So welcome everybody to the April 11th Ortelius architecture meeting. Just like a few minutes ago, Sasha dropped in the chat a link about cleaning owners files and stuff. So today, I had a meeting yesterday with Raj and kind of giving him how to set up his development environment, and I'm just going to go over that for you, for everybody, so you kind of see how I do things and maybe get some tips on the way we have things going. And what we're going to be working on is actually fixing a problem that we have with one of our builds for our that one of our Docker images that has some machine learning in it. So that machine learning, when we do the build, it actually goes through and runs part of the machine learning to kind of build up like the vector database. And we do that we're trying to do that at build time, but it takes about a half hour for that process to run. And when we added in the ARM processor as well as the AMD, it was taking over 2 hours for it to create the image, and it would eventually time out. So we're going to work on fixing that today. Let me share my screen, and we'll actually go over what Sasha mentioned just a minute ago with the owner's files. And I'll show you how we have everything set up for Ortelius to manage that information. So in the Ortelius repo, we have our GitHub repo. And this is kind of like the catch-all repo. So if something isn't found, like a README file or license file down at an individual repo, then it rolls up to the .github repo. So at this level, we do have our code owners file, and it's really basic. And the reason why it's really basic is we use this Parabolus YAML file. This YAML file is the way the Kubernetes project actually manages all of their basically permissions as code. So if we look at that file, what happens is it basically is a YAML file that you define the different sections, who the members are, things like that. So if we have a new member that, like, I just added Elizabeth the other day. So what you do is you go in and add the person in the right places, and in here you'll see like all of our repos. One of the nice things is if you update this file and the repo doesn't exist, it'll actually go out and create the repo for you as part of that process. So what we have are all of our repos, and then you'll see you get into these teams. A lot of these teams are carryovers from the Emporis teams for the Ortelius side of things. We kept it a little more one big giant bucket. So we have a dev team with everybody listed in that and what permissions they have to all the different repos. So when you go and update something, you need to put the person in their GitHub handle in multiple places. It does have to be alphabetical. So you have to make sure. What I'll do is in Visual Studio, I'll sort the individual sections. And what happens is when we actually go in and check it in, let's find one, verify. So this is renovate. The dependent bot is failing on a bunch of stuff. But the last time we did something on main, if you look at what happened there, I was able to figure out how to build uh, the actual Parabola since it's a Golang program. And there's a couple other things that we needed to build, but basically that all is taken care of in action. And we can see here it going through and sending out the events. Right now, I think everybody has accepted, so there's like no extra like invitations that need to be sent or anything like that. But what will happen is it'll show that if an invitation is available. So if we actually need to add somebody, so like if you wanted to add somebody to this, you can fork this repo and do a pull request, and it'll get reviewed. And once you, and one of the things it'll do when you do that pull request, it'll run through and make sure the syntax of that YAML file is all good. So that's how we kind of manage that, Sasha. So our code owners is really basic, and we really drive things through this YAML file. So permissions is code. Does that help kind of clarify?
No, it's perfect because I'm building like I did that blog on that whole build your own cloud native environment, but it's Ortelius centered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to do stuff like this, right?
Yep. So look
So I
at
saw that today.
yeah, look at the
Yeah.
action that's in the so if we
I didn't know
actually look,
about that repo.
yeah, this is the catch-all repo. And here's the actual action that's here um, that we use. So we actually go and install Go. We do our checkout of that repo. We check out some other repos, um, and then we actually go and build the we do a bunch of tidying up and getting the Parabolus Go command line sorted out. So that's where we go and pull that information. Um, and then this is like for the check. It goes through and double checks the syntax. And then there's this thing with this proxy that it uses that we have to go out and build as well. So there's a couple steps, but finally we go through and actually um, set up the proxy, and then we actually apply the Parabolus at that level. It's a
So
little
does Parabolus
convoluted there.
control the permissions?
Yep, yep. That
What,
that Go
what's it?
program has the
Uh,
ability to has access through this token
does it talk
to
to GitHub's API?
yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So this token here has basically it has like full admin token privileges to be
Uh,
able to do things.
um, uh, and you're echoing it into a TXT file. Why do you have to do that?
Because what happens is it's one of the parameters here.
Uh,
It takes instead of it being in the token being displayed on the command line, it puts it into the file to keep it hidden.
oh, clever. Okay, that's smart. And this was
It's
happening in
basically
GitHub Actions, right?
yeah. This is the GitHub action
Yeah.
for
Oh,
applying.
that's why you want it in a text file so that yes, that doesn't appear in the console. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yep. And this
Cool.
GH proxy thing is used to get around some of the throttling at the API level. There is
Clever.
another way you can do it, do this whole thing, and there's like a hosted version of this GH proxy and the Parabolus, but you have to give that other project full permissions to your project, which seemed a little fishy.
Yeah,
So,
that does sound fishy. Eh?
so
It's a GitHub proxy.
yeah, there's this GitHub proxy. that is used for the rate limiting.
Okay.
And somehow this guy uses this guy. I didn't really get into the code. I just kind of hacked my way through to figure out how they were related.
Is that from GitHub or is that someone else that did that?
It's another. Both of these are Golang open source projects.
Okay.
So today we're going to take a look at the workflow toolkit. So Utkarsh put this together for us, and the toolkit allows us to have reusable actions. So the one we're going to be looking at is going to be, I believe, the container release workflow action. And I'm gonna go back to my development environment so folks can kind of see what we have to do on that front. So here I have my Git repo, and like underneath I've created subdirectories. So this is all the repos and microservices for our Ortelius current version, and then I have another one for all the new repositories that we have going on for the new version. We are starting to use some of the new microservices with the old code, so we are kind of marrying the two together. Up at this higher level is the workflow toolkit. Now, one of the things I do is I can on the Mac you can just drag the folder over, and it will open that folder for you. The other way is you can do the open folder here, but I find that it always puts me into my home directory, then I got to navigate down. So usually I have Finder open, and I believe this is going to work the same way on Windows, where you can drag the folder on top of the VS Code program. Some of the things, the way I've configured Visual Studio is sometimes you'll see over on the right, there is something called, let's see, it's under Minimap. See if it'll show up here. Yep. So there's the mini map that showed up. It's like a mini squashed down version of all your source code. I For me, it's pretty useless. So I just disable that so I can get some more real estate. So that's one of the changes that I do is to get rid of Minimap. Other things, I believe I have the GitHub Action plugins installed. Let's see. Yeah. So because I work with a lot with the GitHub Actions, I have installed that plugin. So when you do pull up an action, it'll help you with the syntax and stuff like that. Kind of checking your code as you go, that regular type of thing. It does get some things wrong, so you'll have to kind of ignore some things now and then, but it's pretty good for catching things before you do your check-in on that front. The other plugin I like a lot is there's one for um, markdown previews. So you can go up here. If I bring up a markdown file, it'll show a pretty good idea of what the markdown looks like. So what we're going to do today is, if we look at this workflow, so this is the one that we actually do our build with. And because this is a reusable workflow, we have to define inputs that we're going to pass from the calling workflow. So again, I'm going to go over and we're going to pull up the ML workflow. miter mapping. And again, I just go and drag and drop. And when I do this, the drag and drop, I get a second instance of Visual Studio running. So it makes it pretty easy to manage things. And up here, you can go to Window and switch between the two of them. Just loading the workspace now.
Steve, have you used SSH inside your VS Code before?
No, and I'll get to that in a second.
Because it kind of
So
irritates me when I use
yes,
it.
yes, and I'll explain what I've run into and how I handle that.
Okay,
So
cool.
here is this is the miter mapping is the calling workflow. So, and you can see it's going over the workflow toolkit. Let me get rid of that tray. So there's a couple things that happen is we have this reusable workflow that will set up all the environment variables. So you pass in a bunch of stuff, and what will happen is it'll go out and um, create a bunch of new variables like the image tag, concatenate things together. It's kind of like a handy setup routine that we use for the set env. So it basically will set up all those variables. If we actually looked at that one, we would see that it has inputs and outputs section. Now at the release stage, this is where we're calling the this release workflow over here. And we can see we have our inputs. And like I said, we have we have to pass in the image tag. Well, the image tag is coming from the outputs of the previous set, the set env. Other things that we're passing in are a couple secrets to be able to write to our basically push our Docker image over to Quay. So Quay requires a login, but the nice thing, even though we have to manage a login for Quay, we don't have to run into that rate limiting that Docker has. Other reusable workflows that we have are like running Trivy, Helm. Helm's where we actually create our Helm charts, and then our SBOM. The SBOM part is where we actually upload all of the information we captured up to Ortelius, basically. So this is how we're going to be working on back up to this one, the container released workflow. And when we look at this, this is where the steps come into play. So one of the things that we've added is the hardened runner. Right now we just have it in audit mode. You can actually change this from audit to a block policy. So basically you could think of this hardened runner as a firewall proxy saying, I only want you to go out and talk to these endpoints. The next, we're going to set up the QEMU, which is an emulator for doing different builds of the different processors. So ARM versus AMD. We have to check out our code. One of the things, because we're going through and we're going to be signing our actual Docker image with cosign, we have to make sure cosign's installed. And because we want to have BuildX generate an attestation in Providence in SBOM, we have to make sure that we go and install BuildX. I did have to add a specific version on here because there was an actual bug in the current release. We had to go to a release candidate on that front. There's some if statements. So if we're basically, if you're on a fork, you don't want to log into Quay basically. So this is saying if we're on the Ortelius side, we're doing a push, we're pushing the main, you go ahead and log in. And then we're going to, same thing, we're going to do the build. Now this is where this line here, is where we need to go ahead and make a change. And you can see I have a timeout of 100 minutes, and that quite wasn't working. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, insert it, and of course it always messes up the indentation. So we're going to create this one as AMD, and we'll create this one as ARM. So we'll drop this off, and we'll drop that one off. Now, hopefully this is going to work because we're using the same image tag on the push, um, and hopefully that will allow us to make it happen. And I'm not sure what's going to happen
Did we
with,
lose Steve?
yeah,
Or did I?
you got a question? Oh, we got a duplicate ID here. I'll make this one ARM. And then we're going to go ahead and sign. We'll see what happens. Um, so I think we're going to need a second signing as well. So we're going to say sign AMD, because you can see this is taking the digest from the AMD build. So we'll duplicate that. And we'll actually do this in blocks. So we'll kind of move things around. So put all the AMD pieces together. And of course it, like I said, it messes up the indentation when you do the copy and paste. All right, so this is all for ARM. And what we want to reference here is going to be build underscore ARM. So this is where that plugin comes into play, the GitHub Action plugin, so it'll fill in the right variable for us. It gives us that pre-population. So we got ARM there, ARM there. We got ARM there. That's going to be all the AMD pieces. So I think we're looking pretty good there. Now at the very end here, it is build only. So basically this is going to say if I'm on a fork, just go off and build the whole thing, but not publish it. So in this step, we're basically it's just going to default to building AMD on a fork, which is fine. You just want to see if the build's successful. All right, now your Visual Studio folks that love the little Git interface. I never use it. And the reason being is I go over to the command line, so into my shell. So depending on what operating system you're on, for me on the Mac, it's under my terminal window is under Utilities terminal window. And one of the things you can set up is you can create a new tab with the different colors. So you can see I have a couple that are black, and then I have a green one. This just helps me really quickly identify. So like in this one, I may have a Docker run going on for like a Rango. The reason why I do this is if I go back to Visual Studio and we go to View Output, some of you like to use the little terminal window here. It's handy, But what happens is if I do a Docker run here of like a Rango and I close this workspace, it's going to kill that process as well. So, and then you'll be like, well, why can't I connect to my database anymore? It's because it stopped running because of you're running your shell inside of Visual Studio. You close Visual Studio, you want to go look at, just to get out of the way, go open up another folder. So I never use the terminal window inside of here. I will use, like, let's say, if we go back over to the miter mapping one, and go to main. So I will run a program and debug it from here. So when that happens, you will see the debugger actually kick off, and you'll get your window at some point here. There it goes. I haven't run this one in a while, so it's taking a.
Uh, yes, Steve.
Yep.
Uh, Now we have to update it in every other workflow file, right? Like in the
Yes.
microservices.
Yes. So what we'll jump back to that. So I just wanted to show you. So in this case, I'm actually running the debugger in inside of Visual Studio, which will work because that allows me to step through the code. And depending upon the language, some of the output may come to the output tab. Other parts will come to the debug console. Some of it will come to the terminal. It just depends on the language and how the Visual Studio connects to the debugger at that level. So that's one of the things that if I do close this window, I will stop that debugging session at that point in time. And because we're microservice based, I'll have 3 or 4 of these Visual Studios sessions up and running where I can trace transactions across all the different, as a transaction moves from one microservice to another and so on. So that's where I'll have a couple of these up. And like Sasha, you're saying, the SSH inside of Visual Studio, just don't do it. Just open your terminal windows and work from there.
Sucks. Yeah, it sucks because I find that it almost like makes your Visual Studio disappear completely, almost like it's being closed. And you have
Yep.
to like right click on the little icon at the bottom and go back to where your main window was again. It's like a bit
Yeah.
annoying. Eh?
Yeah. So I just bring up multiple. I just group them together. You could also
Yeah.
float one of these off and break it apart, so you can have like 2 attached
Mm.
together. And then with this one on Mac, you can put it on a different desktop and stuff like that. There's ways uh, to bring all that together, but I don't
And
even
just one quick
use.
thing, Steve.
Yeah,
I invited you to Warp Terminal. If anybody else wants me to invite you, because that's what I use. I
cool.
think you might like it. It's got lots of automation and stuff built into your terminal already that you don't have to worry about adding, right?
Yeah, yeah. I use OS. What is it? OZSH is the shell
Yeah.
that I use. So like
Okay.
at this level, I could do my git add. If I do my git commit. Now, one of the things, if we look back at our, so if you look at our workflows, we actually have enabled a linter at the highest level. So what will happen is when I do my commit, because I have pre-commit hooks set up, and if we actually go back up to one of our repos here. Let's pick that one.
Oh, so that's what the workflow toolkit is. It's like the overarching toolkit for all the repos of Ortelius.
Yep.
Oh, that is
So,
so cool.
so in this case, we have Megalinter installed and configured. So what will happen is we'll actually go through and lint all of our code. And what we've done is if we look at a pull request, so we have a pull request out here from Renovate that's run. So Renovate's running all the time in the background. And what it's doing is it's running basically doing our code QL Megalinter. So if Megalinter fails, this pull request is going to be disabled. You're going to get an X by it. So if you go in and push code that isn't correctly linted, you'll get a failure on your pull request. So one of the things I have set up is a pre-commit hook, and I have a couple of them. I have one that goes out and trims all the white space, cleans up
Yeah,
the end of files, make
yeah,
sure that
super
we're not
cool.
adding any huge files, and then Megalinter's running in the background. For those of you that I would highly recommend that you install Megalinter.
Super cool.
It's very cool. All of our repos have the configuration file in place, so you'll find a Megalinter YAML file that I've gone through and tweaked to turn some stuff off, make sure certain things aren't being checked, stuff like that. That are just annoying, that we just don't need. The Megalinter has something like, yeah, 56 languages, 24 formats, 20 formatting tools. So if you go out and visit that, I'll put that in chat. Make
Steve,
sure you have that installed.
does GitHub Actions call the workflow repo every time? Is that how
Yes,
it works?
yes,
Okay.
because it's a reusable workflow.
Yeah, that's clever.
So if we actually go back, I close that. Oh, there it is. So, oops, wrong window.
Yeah, it's super
Spider
smart,
wrapping there.
man. Cheapers.
So if we look at our workflows here, we have our build push, our Megalinter, our scorecard. So the build push one, and we'll see that this workflow that we're working with is tied to a particular SHA, right? So it's the A3E SHA. So Renovate in the Mend will go through and maintain the SHA for us. So it'll pin it to the particular SHAs automatically for us, which is really handy. So that's where you'll see our pull requests coming across. So, whoops, we go back to the pull request.
So you said Renovate maintains the SHA, and
Yep. Yeah, we have it configured for it to automatically update the digest.
clever.
So in this case, we have a pull request that Renovate did, and it is saying that we need to update our Docker image, our Docker files to basically bump the SHA for ChainGuard Python. So if we actually look at the files that are changing, Renovate is maintaining our Docker file for us automatically.
Yeah, makes sense.
So let's see if our
Yeah, Renovate adds the SHA, right? Okay, I
yep.
see. Yeah, that's cool.
So this is being annoying
Is that
because
a PR now, right? Because it
yeah,
makes a
that's a
PR for
PR.
you, right? Okay,
Yep.
cool.
And it'll auto merge the PRs after so many hours if there's no conflicts and all the
Okay.
checks pass. So right now this pre-commit hook is taking forever. So what happens is it's actually a Docker. Oh, maybe it just finished. There, just finished. So it's actually a Docker program that runs that megalinter step. And you could also, I'll show you here in a second what it does. Let me do my git push. Because I have admin access, I'm going to push directly against the main of the workflow toolkit. For you guys, if you don't have admin access, you'll have to do a fork and a PR and stuff to make the updates. And if that becomes a headache, let me know and we can change your permissions to make changes easier. So if we go up, back up to the workflow toolkit.
I feel safer without admin.
Yeah, either way, we can make it happen. It's hard to break Git.
Yeah,
So
but don't want to be
we
phoning you the whole time when I do.
yeah. So we actually have a workflow out here in the workflow toolkit. So the workflow toolkit is a bunch of workflows, and then we have another workflow to actually run. And what it does is it goes out and basically tags the version, and so it creates the new version and a release for that the the change that we just made. So if we look at the workflow toolkit, come on, we can see that we just got a new release out here. And if we look at that release, we have a new SHA, the 7D8. Now remember, back on this tool, this workflow, this is the one that's using the toolkit. We're still pinned to the 7E3. So for us to audit so what we could do is we could go into this repo, into MITRE mapping, and we can go and replace the SHAs with the new SHAs, so we start using the new version of the workflow toolkit. So that's kind of a little bit of a pain. So there's some automation that is actually in place that will allow us to go ahead and, so let's see, we're going to do MITRE. We'll actually pick, so we'll stick with MITRE since we're, actually I'm going to pick a bit of one that builds faster. Let's see if we have one. Here's scorecard. So scorecard doesn't have any pull requests against it. I'm just going to use this as an example. So there's no pull requests out there. And if we look at the reusable the workflow for this one, we're just going to look at, so that was 13 hours ago. And we're using the same, let's see, this is using 40 F1. So one of the things that the Renovate does is it keeps this issue out here. So this issue is how the Renovate app, GitHub app works. And there's a whole dashboard that you can link to, but this issue you can never close, and it basically sticks around forever. And you'll see that it has this checkbox. So we're going to check that, and it's actually going to go off and run a task for us. So it's going to go talk to the Renovate dashboard, and because it's talking to the Renovate app, it's going to actually do some work for us. It's going to go out, and we should see here in a minute a new PR show up for us.
It's like a way of controlling Renovate, right? Because that's why it stays there permanently. Yeah. Okay, cool.
You can see over my on my right-hand side a bunch of notifications coming through on Discord.
Oh yeah.
And here is our update that we just made. So we said we wanted to go from our current version of the workflow digest to our new one. Remember, it was 7D8. So now we've had Renovate create us a new PR, and it's done all the updates for us. So we don't have to do anything in Visual Studio. And for me to test it, see how badly we've broken things, there'll be a couple things. We can see that the checks are happening. Now these checks are happening on the Renovate branch. To go through and check to make sure that like the mega linting working, the code QL, the builds are working at that level. I'm going to go ahead and, because right now we're just doing some testing, I'm going to tell it to squash and merge anything. We're going to live dangerously.
Let me
And
do it, Steve.
now,
I'm good at it.
yep. Now you can see we just did our PR on main. This one's running on the branch. So this one that's running on the branch will just do the build, but it won't do. It'll only do the build for the AMD. It won't go through and do the build for ARM and AMD because of the way the if statements were set up. So our
So
set
it's only
AMD
going to
range.
do changes.
Yep.
Only going to do the changes. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're going
This
through
is what you
install.
had to do the other day, right? When we needed ARM architecture for running
Yep.
on my pies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened was with that the MITRE mapping, because it runs so long, um, it just would fall over. So we're just testing this on a smaller repo, so we don't have to sit around for an hour and wait. So it's actually doing the build right now against the AMD. So if I go back to release, if we look at the steps, this is the step that we're at, the AMD step. So we've checked out the code, we've installed CodeSign, we installed the BuildX. We're doing that build. It's actually exporting the image, and now it's going to go and invoke cosign to sign everything. I added a step to verify that our signing looks good, that we're able to pull it out. So this is the payload and the signing that cosign did for us. And now we're doing the ARM piece. And the ARM piece is pretty similar, except we're just going to be on the ARM platform versus the AMD platform.
And we don't have to like change any workflow file in the microservice, right?
Right. There's nothing. The code base is exactly the same. Just that when we build on the separate processor.
Yeah, because we are not outputting anything from the
Right.
ARM and the AMD. Otherwise, we have to change the workflows in every repo.
Yeah. And most of the base images that we are building on top of have an AMD and they have an ARM base image. So you could run into the case where there's somebody only built an AMD base image and not an ARM one, that we'd run into problems.
Yeah, for that we have to do it manually.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, for the first time.
And an interesting side note why this is, we'll wait for it to build. One of the things that I found was a lot of the stuff that we use are our microservices are using the distrolist chain guard images, so they don't have a shell installed, so you can't do your cube exec IT into the shell of the container because no shell exists. But they're like in the MITRE mapping one, because there's so much machine learning libraries. I actually found there is a Amazon Linux base image that's based on Fedora that we can use. And that base image has no vulnerabilities in it, which is great. And it's relatively small. It's like 60 meg. But it does allow you to have Python and Python running on like Alpine is a headache. Python and Alpine don't get along together very well.
Interesting.
So, all right.
Well,
Looks like we have our two builds done. So our release finished. And now we're on to the other pieces, other steps. So if I go up to summary. So our release is done. Now we split off. These all run in parallel. So once the release is done, Trivia's going to scan an image. We're going to build the Helm charts based on the image, and we're going to gather our SBOM data and upload our information up to Ortelius and Deploy Hub for that. So let's see. Trivia failed. I'll have to check why that's happening later. I'm not that worried about Trivia falling over. Let's go over to Quay and see if our images got uploaded correctly.
so just that whole process was to build to build images, right, for containers, right?
Yeah.
For Ortelius.
So let's see if I'm on the right workflow. Scorecard. So we go over to our scorecard, look at our tags. Okay, it was built 2 minutes ago. And it looks like we only have our ARM. So see here, these have ARM and they have two icons, AMD and ARM. So it looks like our solution didn't work as we expected it to, because it looks like the second build just went and replaced the first build. So on our push. So I'll have to do some research to see how we can make that happen.
So now I could update my Helm chart on my end, right?
Yeah.
And then with Argo CD, actually, if I set up
Yeah.
Argo CD in such a way, it would check the Helm chart. It would see I would do a pull, would do a new version. It would deploy a new version of Ortelius into Kubernetes.
Yep. So what actually happens is after the release is done, Helm's going to run, and the Helm is going to generate our new chart. So this is us.
How do you generate the chart?
There's another reusable workflow
Okay.
for Helm.
I'll go have a look at that.
And
Helm
what it
release
does,
workflow.
yeah, and what it does is it goes and updates the values files with the new image tag and a new SHA. So, and then what happens is that actually we run the Helm chart releaser. And the Helm chart releaser basically, we go through and sign a bunch of stuff. Basically, it creates a release, a GitHub release of that Helm chart, and that allows us to then publish an index.yaml on the GitHub pages side. So it kind of branches off, because the way we host our Helm charts is by using GitHub pages. And that's what this whole other workflow does, is it creates, updates our Helm, the image name and tags, and then it goes out and creates a new Helm chart version. So if we look at scorecard here, we can see 3 minutes ago we got a new release. And if we actually go to the GitHub Pages branch, we can see that we have a new index.yaml for that new chart that we generated. Now we're not done yet. So this is the child chart, and what we need to do is we need to update the parent chart. So this one here is our Ortelius charts, and we'll see if an action is running now. Yep. So that child chart, that reusable workflow for generating the Helm chart, once the child chart has been generated, we send a workflow dispatch message over to this repo, and it says go generate the main charts now. So it's going to generate the parent chart that includes all the updates to the child charts. So for you, Sasha, you can't you won't get a new Helm chart until this one is actually finished.
Okay.
And
So
this one's a little weird because we have to put a sleep in there. The GitHub pages are cached for about 3 to 5 minutes before a new page shows up to be able to be read. So the web pages on GitHub are cached, so we have to put a 5-minute sleep in there.
yeah, I noticed that when I was doing my blog. I deleted an image and I had to wait exactly that, like 5 minutes before that image was updated.
Yep.
Yeah.
So here we should be done pretty soon with our sleep.
We have to write about the whole workflow. It's a long process.
Yeah.
There you go, Arvind. It's perfect study material.
Yeah.
I'll help you
So
because I also didn't know this process.
so now
Like if
what
we
we do
don't,
is we actually have a Node.js program that Ben down in Australia wrote for us to go out and gather the information about the charts. So what it does, I'll show you what it does. So
Steve, if we didn't have a Ben, how would you do it?
you'd have to manually update the information. It's a pretty simple
In the parent chart, you'd have to add the charts with the new version, or the
yeah,
new version next to the charts in the parent chart. Is that right?
yeah. So what it does is it goes out and clones all the repos,
Yeah.
all the child repos, and then it goes through and parses the chart.yaml files for the version and determines the version of basically the tag that you want to include from the child charts.
How do other companies do this then? I mean, surely they don't do it manually. Do they also just have something written that does
Probably
something automated?
probably written in some way.
Okay. So they have some sort of logic. Everyone has this problem,
Yeah,
having to update your parent chart
yeah. And
with your
then
child charts. Okay.
so we go through and we download all the charts. We kind of smash them all together. There's this Helm package that we use with the signing key. So everything we do is signed. And then we create the release of the using that parent chart that's out there. So now that this is actually finished, you could do your Helm update and you'll get the latest charts. So if you look at our charts here,
So what I'm gonna do is I'm busy learning how to use Argo CD, and I've already got some Captain stuff running. You know that cool diagram we drew?
yeah,
I'm building that at home, and then I'm gonna blog it. And then so what I want to do is when Ortelius is changed, I want to be able to whatever take that logic. It comes down my side. My Argo CD picks it up and auto deploys
yep,
and syncs Ortelius to the new version, right? And then I'll blog about it and show people how we can use Argo CD to automatically manage their Ortelius deployment.
yep.
Yeah.
So in this at this level, we have our new parent chart that's out there. So it's 3858. So if we actually go over to Artifact Tom, we
Your
should
Artifact
see.
Hub is great. I use it. I use it all the time for Ortelius because it helps me when I do something completely daft and I need the defaults to see what the default settings were. Super
Yeah,
useful.
Yeah.
it
So
reminds.
Artifact Hub hasn't run yet. It runs every
Okay.
hour or every half hour. So Artifact Hub in a half hour will pick up our new version of that chart
Oh, and
of that
Arvin and
parent.
I came across something there.
Yeah,
Is it possible to? Sorry, do you want to ask Arvin? I think that's what you're gonna ask. I think you just reminded me about Azure. There's no
yeah, it
Azure
reminds me
config.
also like me and Sasa are
Yeah.
working and there is no guide available for the AKS cluster. You write it about the kind cluster, the ZKE one, and the AWS one. Can you like add it for how to do it in the Azure cluster also in the artifact hub?
Yes, what we would need to do is that actually comes down to the ingress that is needed. And I'll show
Oh,
you where that is. Let me show you this nice little program that Ben put together. So this is the basically this is the Node.js program that goes out and collects all the child charts into a parent chart. So we basically listed the repos we want to look at, um, and it does work to go and grab. It'll pull down the chart. It'll actually template, do a Helm template to find the deployment in the YAML, and then from there, once it has the deployment YAML, it'll go out and find the corresponding image values and stuff, and goes out and finds the commits and things like that. And then what it does is it actually will aggregate together. We take there's some header stuff we need for Artifact Hub. So we go out and add some things in there, and eventually we update the README file. So Sasha, you kind of helped me with this with the Ortelius version for the badging on the
oh,
README page. That's handled
yeah.
here, and then we finally just go out and write out all the new chart, and from there the workflow will go out and do that Helm packaging and create all the new parent chart referencing all the correct versions of all the child charts.
Oh, that's cool.
So to answer Arvin's question on the
Because Arvin's got Utkarsh gave us some access to Azure, and Arvin and I have been running a Kubernetes cluster there, and then we're like, cool, let's deploy Ortelius. That's how come we came across this.
yep. So if you look for so in the Artelius repo, this is the mono repo that we're looking at.
Yeah,
So in the mono repo, we is where the ingress is defined. Um, so, oops, I want the chart. Where are my charts? There it is. Go to chart. So in the ingress here in our template, this is where you need to add a section. You have to figure out how to get the ingress on Azure configured. So in this
so you
case,
need to
this
add an
is
annotation, right? So that
yep,
that it knows about it, so that you can enable it. So when you deploy in Azure,
So
Azure will know about it, right? The
yep.
Kubernetes there, or the
So
load
this is
balancer, whatever is in
yeah.
front
So
of it.
this one's the Amazon load balancer. So there's a
yeah,
section for the Amazon load balancer, and there's certain annotations that are needed, like the certificate ARN and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Here's the Google load balancer.
so Sasa we use the STO, right? It's pre-configured in the Azure clusters.
And then here's the if it's not basically if it's not Amazon or Google, and then I believe this is to handle kind. I can't remember. Oh, yeah, this is no, this one is for K3S, basically Rancher. So
So
Rancher
like,
uses. So this is it. If it's not Amazon or Google, and you're not running on K3D, then make your Ingress class Nginx.
okay, I think we are using STO or Calico. I have to like recheck with Sasa.
Yeah, and then so there's going to be an Ingress class name that's usually used. So in the case of kind, you have to actually install the kind classes, and that's what this is doing here. Is actually installing the kind classes into the cluster. So there's a bunch of RBAC stuff and things like that. So you may need a section to install um, the correct Ingress controller for EKS,
Or AKS. Okay.
AKS.
Yeah, Sasa.
Sorry, my internet
Uh,
keeps dying. I don't know why. I think there's some.
yeah, that's
So
okay.
this is going to be the Ingress is going to be where everything pivots around,
Okay,
and your
Sasa,
and your external load balancer.
we are using
Uh,
like Calico or STO for the ingress because we have installed both.
yeah, I mean, when we went through the clicky next, it was Istio.
And yeah, I think for networking it was Calico that we choose,
Yes,
but
I think it was Calico. Yes, Calico networking under the hood. Yeah, I prefer to use Trafic. I find it. I don't know. It makes sense to me.
like Steve told me like either we can use predefined one or we have to use Nginx or we have to like write the code for Calico or something if we are using it. I think
Yeah.
the cluster is
So
not running, otherwise we can show it to Steve right now.
AKS. So it looks like the default Ingress class may work. So I'd look at so what it is uh, it's going to be an external load balancer. Uh, what is it? AKS.
I think I saw it the other day. Settings.
Because what you want to be able to do is so when you know it's working, so I'm connected up to the deploy up Google cluster. So if I do a kubectl get a ingress, it's going to show that our ingress for the Nginx has been bound to a public IP address.
Yeah.
That's the goal that you're trying to accomplish is binding the ingress to a public IP address.
Yeah, exactly.
And like this one's kind of the same way. there's a couple different ways to do that. Yeah, so here you may have to create an inbound, a public IP for your inbound load balancer.
Yeah, so it's like on my home network, I had to use Metal LB as the
Yep,
cloud load balancer, right? So you just got to mimic that. So that
yep,
I just got to mimic that in Azure language.
yeah, exactly. And depending, it looks like there's ways to bind your public IP to your cluster IP and things like that.
Uh,
So, which is basically giving full access to your cluster to the public instead of to a particular service. So there, you're going to have to hunt through the documentation on how to set it up.
Yeah, we will do that.
yeah, we don't want to open it up to like the entire planet, because then Bitcoin mining
Right.
will go through the roof, and we'll have a nice letter to be writing to Microsoft. Please forgive me for spending $60,000 in like 24 hours.
Yeah.
I'm from Africa, man. I don't have $60,000. I've written
Let's
letters
do.
before.
Like this one may be part of it.
I found something really cool.
Oh, here's this
Yeah.
one may be what you guys are looking at. Need to look at.
Yeah, I found the same, and then
That's a
it
nice one,
contain
eh?
it contained the master cloud for both AWS EKS and Azure AKS. I go to home and I checked it.
Because this one has the public IP address and then a AWS controller, and then it gets forwarded on to our in ingress. It looks like inside of the cluster. So there's the ingress controller, then the ingress service. So this is like what Sasha you had to install with traffic, was to have an ingress controller. So in your case with Azure, you may be able to install traffic as your ingress and controller.
Which would be cool, actually.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have
I
your
really like traffic.
your AKS load balancer talking to your traffic ingress controller, and then your ingress controller traffic is talking to our Nginx service.
Yes.
And then from there, the Nginx service will reverse proxy everything to the back end for you.
Yes.
So you just need to get this from here to here figured out. So this box here.
Yeah, because the load balancer will take care of the rest. In front of that, yeah.
We will show you in the next meeting what we have done. Because we got the cluster back on 15 or 16, and then we will try to like do it again.
Yeah, you could try using.
Steve, how do we add new features to the Ortelius home chart? Like, say for example, I hope I'm not asking a question that's not in line with what we're talking about today, but like, for example, I want to persist the Ortelius Postgres microservice data, the database. I want to persist it to a storage class.
Yeah. So that's going to come in. Let me find it. So it's actually at the, should be documented in the README.
Okay, so today we learned that there's a central workflow repo that all microservices use as their overarching way of being built or configured, right? Or
Right.
Tested and linted and that type of thing, right? By using that
Yep.
workflow repo.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
We should draw a
Steve,
diagram. That would be cool.
yeah, can you create an issue about it and like tell us how the flow is going? I will start writing about it. What is complex?
I tell you what, let's go look at the repo, follow the code in the YAML file, and then take it to Steve and see where you went wrong.
Yeah.
But in that way, I have to run all the repo, and it will create new releases. So that's not a good
So
part.
here, Sasha, is on the Artifact Hub on the installing pieces. You'll see a section for using an internal Postgres database or using an external one.
Ah,
If you use an internal one, basically you're going to set a Postgres enabled equals true, and that will create a stateful set for the database.
so I've deployed Ortelius already, and I used, what did I use? Let me just look at my command that I use.
And depending on the cluster that you're running, like for example on kind, we have to create an external mount for kind to take the host path and map it to a container path to persist the Postgres database once the cluster is
Yeah.
deleted. So
But
just
I'm
depends on
using
your cluster.
microcat. I'm using microcat with the storage class, NFS storage class. It's got a default storage class, so it'll set up the PVC for me. So if I can set the storage class to use anywhere in Ortelius to use the default for the database,
Yep.
it'll just pick it up.
Yeah.
It'll just
So
create it.
if you look at
Yeah, I'll post it in the chat now. This is the command I use.
yeah. So if you look at Postgres out here, there's a microservice for Postgres. It's
Yeah,
not
that's
really.
running inside my cluster. It's running in my cluster, and I want to make that data for that microservice run off my NAS, my NFS server.
Yep. So what you may need to do is in the Postgres template at the deployment level, you'll see where it's doing a volume mount.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I see what you're saying. I can add a storage class there.
Yeah. So what
My
you do is you do an if statement for the storage class. So if the storage class is defined, then add in that. And
okay.
that's in the MS Postgres repo.
Can I raise a name? So what could I test that on my side, or then I could raise a PR?
Yep.
Is that right? To add
Yep.
that functionality to. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and you can run all these charts locally, so you could download all the charts, explode them out into a directory, and then go update the charts. And then when you do your Helm and install your Helm upgrade, you point to the local directory instead of the remote repo.
That's exactly what I've been doing. Yeah, I've been doing Helm upgrades, but with a -F for file.
Yep. So that's where if you need to, so these are doing dynamic PVCs basically.
Yeah, dynamic, exactly.
So if you want a particular storage class, or if you want to bind to, if you want to add another section in here, so a section to create the PVC and create the PV, you could add it all in here with if statements and then reference it. That's
Okay,
going to
cool.
be the easiest.
I haven't done that before, so I'll give it a go.
I would first try seeing on the dynamic volumes if you can add a storage class.
Yeah, a lot of the applications I've deployed, their Helm charts have you just it's got storage class option, and I just set it to the default, and it auto creates
Yep.
the PVCs, no problem. It's like super nice.
Yeah. So I like in when this gets deployed to like Google, Google will create a PV and a PVC that are dynamic but will persist to the stateful set. So if that stateful set is taken down, the next time it's recreated, it'll grab the same volume that's been saved for Google.
Yeah, so you mustn't use delete, you must use reclaim, right? Otherwise you delete all your database data.
Yeah, yeah,
That would be
exactly.
bad.
And that's one of the things when you create the your own custom storage classes, you got to make sure you do retain.
Um, cool. Yeah, I blogged it on how to set it, how people can set it up if they have a NAS device at home or something just with disks, right?
So,
And I showed people how to do it in how to bake an Ortelius Pi Part 2, how to prepare your Kubernetes cluster for NFS. Yeah,
yep,
and I showed how I did. So then I just back up all my PVCs that are on my NAS, and then I have a backup of all my data, you see.
yep,
And I just
yep,
restore it. And I've actually tested it. I restored and it worked perfect.
yeah,
Kubernetes just came up and reclaimed them and carried on.
yep. And that's
Mm.
one of the things that, like Google, if we needed to, if you needed to have multiple pods writing to the same um, data storage at the same time,
Yeah.
you would have to implement an NFS, and Google has something called, I think, File Store.
Okay.
That's a very fast NFS implementation.
Yeah.
But the minimum amount of data that you can buy is 1 TB.
Wow. You see, that's why I wanted to write this blog so that people like Elizabeth and Arvin and anyone who joins is on this call could set up their own little environment at home to it just helps you understand what you're doing, understand what people are talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can do amazing things. The only thing I want to ask is one more thing is, can we please update part 1 of my Pi, how to bake Ortelius Pi? It's still the old version.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't know
what?
how to do that.
Yep. I'll
Yeah.
show you real quick.
I've pushed the changes and I don't know if I need to raise another PR or whatever.
Yeah, you're just in the wrong repo.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought
Because
you were talking
Tracy's
to me.
already merged the stuff.
The other two and three are fine.
Yep.
And anyone here, Elizabeth or Arvin, if you want to do something like this at home and you need help, just ask me, okay? Please don't be shy. Yeah.
So what you want to do, Sasha, is start updating the Ortelius.io repo.
Oh, I need to submit it there.
Yeah, so if you go into content,
Okay, I've got that repo cloned.
yep. Just make sure it's up to sync before you make your changes.
Yeah,
And you'll
well,
see under blog contributors,
okay.
you'll
Is
see
mine, are they
your
there? Oh,
part
there
one.
they are. Okay, I was like so confused. I was like, okay, where's, okay, cool. Okay,
Now,
I'm going there, Steve.
all right. Now, one of
Thanks.
the things with this one is it's actually slightly different. So we have no workflows for this one. We have a code QL, which doesn't really do anything. So because it's our website, we actually host it off of Netlify or Netify.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because it's automated. And once you commit it, it updates the site immediately. It runs a workflow.
Yep. So
Yeah.
what actually happens is the website repo, and this happens with the docs as well.
Mm.
So if I go over to Ortelius.io, it's under the CDF. Um, so come on.
So Steve, I can just go to this repo every time, update it, and open a PR, and then just ask your Tracy to merge.
Yep.
I don't
So
know, like, I don't want to circumvent processes in terms of just merging it myself. What happens if it sounds terrible and no one's I'd like to be peer reviewed and improved.
yeah, and that's if you do you could just do a PR.
Yeah, yeah.
So what
I
ends
don't
up
mind
happening
waiting.
is, yeah, and I'm out there watching the repos all the time.
Yeah, and I'm
So
up earlier than you because the sun comes here first.
this is going to watch. This is configured to watch any commits to main on the Ortelius .io repo. And
Yeah.
when it does, it'll actually go out and do a build.
Okay, cool.
So this will actually go out and
And because
and
you said today you showed us how you can use the preview of your README of the Markdown in your Visual Studio. I don't actually need to run Hugo then because I can see what it looks like just by using that,
it'll
right?
get you close. The
Oh,
preview
okay.
isn't exact. You'll have some broken links and things like that in the
Yeah,
preview mode. But
and
Okay.
if you run the
one thing,
if you run
the
the Hugo
line break
local,
won't work.
yeah,
Uh,
What?
If you are not using the bullets, the line break won't work. So you have to put the VR
Uh,
tag. And also, I shared
uh,
the GitHub extension in the chat. It's like the Markdown lint. So it will lint all the errors in the Markdown.
yeah. So
Thanks, Arvin.
back to that. So if we go over to, let's see, I think it's called a website. Let me just make sure this is the right repo. Yeah, I just haven't updated this. But if you run Megalinter locally, outside of the commit hook, it will actually, it should be set up to lint your Markdown code as well.
Oh, yeah, so that's perfect. Okay, cool.
So we'll see that it'll chug along here. It takes a little bit for it to get loaded up.
We got a lot of microservices.
And you'll see here that we have format and fix turned on. Well, not necessary for this repo. So this is going to lint it, but not fix
Mm,
it
mm.
in this case.
Using Truffle Hog, nice.
There's a bunch of default ones that are installed.
Yeah, I use
And what
Truffle Hog. You can scan
it,
people's. I scanned a client's cloud deployment once. It was scary. Yeah, I
yep,
found so many secrets just out there lying there. I was like, you guys are living in madness. But anyway.
yeah. So what's happening is Megalinter is a Docker container that runs. So if I hit Control C here, it'll actually keep running. So you have to actually kill the Docker
Uh,
container. So this didn't like something. I haven't run it on this repo in a long time. So if we actually, we may need to do some work on the rules for Megalinter on the website repo.
yeah.
Steve, can we do pair programming someday, like we did last year?
Yeah.
Like you have given tasks to me and Sasa, and we do the live PR. I want to do it again.
Okay. Oh, let me just get to a repo.
Yeah, the best way that I learned about Ortelius was deploying it myself on my own cloud environment at home. It was like a great learning experience.
Yeah. So I just changed over to a repo that I know has the linting all configured.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'd like to understand, Steve, the one of the things I'd like to understand. I don't know what anyone else. I'd like to understand better how do you tie in all the microservices into that single workflow repo? How do you tie that in? Do you just it's like a block of YAML, right? In a YAML file well, I suppose it's a step, right? In the
Yeah,
workflow that calls that repo, right?
yeah. So what it is if we look at,
Because it makes
look
sense to
back.
write because
So
it's
this
actually
is,
drive principles, right? So it's one you configure once, and then everything can access that to do
yep.
its
And this is
linting
how
something.
it's referenced. So we go to the Ortelius workflow toolkit. So
Got
that's
GitHub.
where the repo where all the reusable workflows are. And then we
And
say
that
which,
path, how does that path? How do you know that path? That is Ortelius. Is that the organization?
this is the
Ortelius path.
org,
Yeah,
that's the org, and then that's the
and that's
repo,
the repo, and then
and
oh,
then the directory in the repo.
is .github. Oh, and there's workflow. Okay, I see now.
So here's the Helm release one that we updated, or we
Oh
didn't.
yeah.
And then I'm just happen to be in that. We'll have the build one. Here's the container workflow one that we built.
Hmm. Okay.
So it just goes org, repo, and then the directories in that, and then the SHA that you want to reference off of that repo.
Okay, cool.
Basically, which version. You could use a version tag as well, or a SHA.
Okay.
And if we go
Thanks.
back to the megalinter,
Hopefully someone else also learned from that. I'll ask a lot of questions, sorry guys, because there's a lot of stuff I don't know.
so it was interesting on the megalinter for the Golang stuff. There is a bug in the base image for megalinter where it only has Go 121 installed, and it'll
Yeah.
throw errors because it can't lint some of the stuff because it doesn't have the right linter, the right version. So here you'll see that some of the stuff has formatting yes.
Yeah.
So
It's actually
format
breaking
fix.
it.
It'll actually rewrite your code.
Yeah, but isn't it breaking it then?
No, because you get to review it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a PR before you can apply it, right?
It'll be a local commit.
Okay, cool.
So here it's running the markdown linting like Arvin was talking about. And because the README is generated, we have some duplicate headers. It's something, this one here, we're ignoring errors. We could actually go in and configure the markdown lint to ignore MD024 if we wanted to get rid of these errors. So there's another markdown linters, making sure that all the YAML looks good. Now there's some things like the YAML linter doesn't like the Helm templates. It can't figure out what to do with them. So you have to configure the Helm templates to be ignored as part of the
Mm.
linting process.
So it doesn't understand like the curly braces and stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It just is
Yeah,
like
it has a
it's
wobble.
yeah.
It doesn't get it.
So I've gone in and configured rules to tell this linter not to look at any of the Helm charts. And this will just keep going, and eventually it'll say everything's good. It'll go through, what do we have? It'll go through all these. So we
Yeah.
got about 24 that it'll chug through. And like you said, there's a bunch of default ones like Git leaks, gripe, truffle
Oh,
hog.
that comes part of it, right?
Yeah, they're just turned on by default. And this one's always can be frustrating because it'll want you to like combine things in your Docker file
Yeah.
into a single run command, um, make your shell commands certain format. So it I found that the megalinter is a great way to learn how to program better.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because like I used to, when you brought it up, I checked it out myself and I started running it, and I've used it with my developers too. And I was like, damn, why is it doing this? You have to go and
Yeah,
dig in and find
it
out
it
why.
really improves your programming skills tremendously.
Yeah, mine
It'll
not
be
so
like,
great.
you have a bunch of unused variables. You have global variables that shouldn't be global
Yeah.
variables. It really, your if statements are incorrect. So the way you check for like empty and none or nil really come into play with the linters. They definitely help you improve your programming. That's why I will run, before I do a check-in, and running the mega linter as a pre-commit hook, I'll run it manually so I can see in detail which linter is complaining on what lines.
Yeah, it's a good way to learn, right? And also, yeah, I totally agree with you. It shapes you into like how you can write your code, maybe more resourceful, work. Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I got to run off to another meeting.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody. Hopefully, this is helpful.
Oh,
Hello.
it's very,
I know
Yeah,
there's
I learned a
I
lot.
know there's a lot of moving parts. So,
yeah, that's
all right,
true.
Yes.
take care, everybody.
Cheers. Bye,
Cheers.
everyone.